Hello everyone, so this is a quick introduction into Houdini volumes, how they work inside Houdini. I'm going to be making a proper tutorial series on my Vimeo one day soon when I actually have the time to do it, but for now this is something I record technically every session for the Houdini FX artist just to get a better overview of how volumes work inside Houdini. So to start out, I'm going to quickly talk about resolution, just quickly touch on it. So I'm going to lay down a grid. And I think we all know resolution if I bring it to top-down view. And I'm going to copy this parameter here. I'm going to set it to 100. I shall set it to 50. And I want to see some color in this, so I'm going to put down a point up, load up. I can either load up my color into there, which is going to give me my positional values. But I'd rather actually have a turbulent noise instead. And link that up properly, so it's not going into the type. I'm going to set my amplitude up, and I'm just going to increase my frequency. So, as you can see, it's quite blocky. This is because we don't have that many pixels, as it were. If I increase this, though, 1000, we can see that we actually have a lot of distinction, and it looks quite nice because we've got a higher resolution. However, that took a bit longer than just setting it to 50 by 50. And if we take a look, our memory and our cook time was much longer than it should have been. So if I bring this back down to 50, disable this and then restart it, we can see that's now only 400 kilobytes and it's about 2 milliseconds. So with 3D, we have something called a voxel or a volume pixel, which is basically this except in 3D. So you can imagine it like a set of cubes all together. Inside of Houdini, we have two distinct types of volumes. We have the volume, standard Houdini volume, which will be this shade of color here, and it will actually say volumes. And we have the VDB. And please note that when I type in VDB, we have a few extra VDB nodes in here. This is from a custom GitHub project that needs to be updated because it actually crashes Houdini. And we have the VDB. We can hover over this, it'll say VDB, and it's a dark shade of purple. Apologies, I've just gotten over a cold. So, some distinctions between these two. If we load up, I'm going to call this density. I'm also going to call this density. So with a Houdini volume, a standard volume, we can see that we've got 10 by 10 by 10. And if we take a look at this here, we can see that it is actually divided by 10. So what that means is we actually have 1000 voxels because we're basically saying 10 cubed. And you can see that it actually is quite a poor resolution. So we tend to go 200, and now we get a much finer resolution here, as you can see. If we go really close into it though, we can start seeing the actual cubes there taking shape. So that's just a quick overview of voxel. Now, some differences between the VDB and the volume. If I load up the volume, the VDB here, and we can see that we want it to be an initial value of like 1. I can set that to 1, and I can set this here. And it actually has a nice visualizing portion here, which helps us. So we can see just how many pixels along the side, at least, there will be. Now the reason is we're not actually getting any values inside here, and it's actually saying 0 by 0 by 0, is because VDBs have a great method of storing memory, in the sense that even though this volume has all these voxels in it, most of these voxels right now are deactivated, meaning that they don't attribute anything to the memory, they don't attribute anything to the file cache, which is absolutely great. That's what we technically want. You've also got a 64-bit float or a 32-bit float. These are the accuracy points. And we don't tend to go into these. So we've also got two different types in volumes overall. So if I go back to the volume, into this Houdini volume, and we can see that we've got one volume called density, which is 200 by 200 by 200, or 200 cubed. But let's say I want a vector. So I can just quickly change it from a scalar to a vector field. And if I middle mouse now, we now have density x, y, and z. And this is because, and this has been split into 3 different vectors, into 3 different scalar fields, because Houdini volumes can't recognize a vector field in volumes, which is a big detriment. And kind of what makes VDBs superior as well is the fact that we can actually have, so if I change this from a float to a vector float, we can now see over here it says a vector free instead of a float. And there's not really that much of a difference between these two, except for the fact that this is much faster, greater on memory, and is now our preferred method of using volumes inside Houdini. There are some caveats to this, and I'm going to be going over those. But for starters, we've also got the matrix field, which is basically how many is that? That's 9 fields here, and I've never actually had to use this in a volume, but this would be a matrix field is typically used in transformations. So this is where it would be used here, but I have yet to come across a use case, and you can see just how slow this is now. If I go to here, we don't actually get a matrix field here. We just get a simple vector float. We also get the vector type. This doesn't really change much here, so you don't really need to have these changed, which is great. You've also got different types of ways to visualize these things. If we wanted to visualize, if we wanted to change these in, say, like a float, a wrangle. So I know how to do it in VDBs. I'm not too sure in volumes. Let me just quickly check. So in the geometry spreadsheet, if we middle mouse click, you can see that we've got 1 point attribute, which is the position, which is what we need, and the position is at 0. We've also got a 1 primitive attribute, which is the name, and it's got 9 unique different names. So if I go over to my primitive attribute, we can see that we've got 9 separate names, all with density on them. I'm just going to change this back to a vector, so we've got 3. And inside here, we've got something called intrinsics. And I can actually say show all intrinsics. And Houdini's crashed. There we go. And we can actually see where all the different actual goings on behind all this. So I've kind of lost the scroll wheel for some reason. Oh no, that's just Houdini crashing on me. I don't know why it's crashing on me. That is concerning, considering I just upgraded my computer. But I will close Chrome. Quickly, just do some quick checks, which is weird because it's not actually using anything. This is why we don't use volumes anymore. First class example. There's a sense that they're just slow and they actually eat up memory quite badly. So I'm actually going to delete that node. There we go. And because I've set true intrinsics to all, I'm going to actually go show all intrinsics now here, and we can see that we have some intrinsics. We're going to leave the volumes behind because they are old and they're not used anymore, only in specific cases, and we would tend to like to use the VDBs now, basically just because they're better for memory and they're faster. So we've got the intrinsic volume scale, voxel size, I should say. And if you middle mouse click, we can see that it is actually 0.01. Along here, we've got the smoke, the visualize mode, and this is basically showing us a display mode here as well. We can change this later on, further down as well. We've got different types of the value type, the class that it uses, and so on and so forth. We don't tend to use these as much. We do in some cases if you really need to, but this is just handy that you know that this is here in case you come across some use cases, which I have when you're dealing with something like fluids. So back to here. So even though we're filling this up and we're going to give it a background value, that value is not being represented in here. The reason is because these voxels are currently deactivated. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to say VDB activate. If we take a look now, we can actually see they've been activated. However, this is tiny, 0.1 with a division size of 0.1. So this is just one voxel. So I'm going to actually say set the size to 1 by 1 by 1, which is what the other one had. And then I'm going to set to 0.01, which is what the other volume also had. Now you can see that, and it gives a little bit extra as well, which is a little unusual for me, but it is nice that it has this. And you can see that actually giving it a value. If I turn this off, we're actually now, there is no value. However, the fields are now active. If we go back to here, they're not active, even though they could be at the same size as seen here. So let's visualize this. I'm going to lay down a VUB tree. And what this does is it shows us all the active nodes inside of the whatever's inside here. And as you can see, if I wire it into here, we've got nothing, no active voxels. But if I wire this into my VDB activate, we can now see that some voxels have been activated. I tend to turn off the leaf nodes, turn off the active tiles, and turn on the active voxels. And now we can see, and if I turn on solid boxes here, we can actually see just how dense or the resolution is for this. A little weird why it just goes onto one side, but hey, that's pretty nice. So I'm going to push this back up to 1. I am actually a bit curious as to why it's only going on one side. That is unusual. Oh, it's just being frustummed off, I suppose. And if we turn on the active tiles, we can actually see what are active. So these are the tiles. The tiles is what we use in, if you go into like the fluid compress node, I believe, not fluid compress node, the fluid particle fluid source. There should be a tiling thing somewhere here. There we go, we've got the tiling field here, which is what this is here. The greater the resolution, I believe, the better the tiling. I believe the fact that it's just going on one side is just a method of keeping the... Oh, that's why, it's just being on a frustrum. We just tend to set it on voxel size. Okay, that does make sense now. That's why it was only filling on one side. Okay. It was keeping the voxels on only one side, on what the viewpoint typically is from here. Okay. Now that we've got the voxels and the resolutions out of the way, if we go inside here, I'm going to now talk about an SDF, or a VDB from polygons. So if I lay down a box, and as you can tell, if we take a look at the VDB visualize tree, I can do a, I think it would be a mirror. I basically want to cut the cut it in half, but I can't remember exactly how you do that. I just say you just probably do like a attribute angle and say, hey, if the attribute P of the X is greater than 0, greater than equal to 0, then just delete. I need to have that in if statement, my bad. A little rusty today. So at remove point 0, Okay, as you can see, this it's not quite filled. It's just filling the outside edges, which is quite nice. It's what we want. So if I take a box and I do a VDB from polygons, it's going to get us something called a signed distance field, but I'm not going to go into that now. This is something that Saber, I believe, goes into much better in one of his workshops, and this is going to be something else I'm going to go into later. Terribly sorry, I just got someone has come and visited. Give me a moment, please. Terribly sorry about that. That was the posting. Okay, so I've changed it from a distance field to a fog VDB, and it's giving me density. It's basically the same as this. However, if I load up my VDB visualize and I delete it in half, what we should be able to see is I'm going to turn off color as well. What we should be able to see, and if I just say points of values, no, that's not what I want. I don't want points of values. Let's try that. So I'm going to say name the point attributes after the name the points after the name attributes. I'm going to say at CD equals at density. As you can see, we're getting bright on the inside and a bit dark on the outside. Back to that. A little bit hard to see, so I'm going to set it to pixels, so it's a little bit easier. Not quite. We have something in here called fill interior, which when I tick that on, you can see it's actually filled the entire interior. Something that this VDB activate did seem to do, but that's fine. We can focus on this later. So basically what I've done is I've now activated all those interior voxels. If I turn this off, we've also got this interior and exterior band. If I crank this up, technically what should happen is it should expand, but it's not, because this is what happens when you use the surface one. But if I turn the interior one up, we can see that it actually is filling it up quite nicely. But technically we just tend to set it to fill interior. So I've just activated all these voxels. However, not all these voxels are needed. If we take a look, this is using up 8 megabytes in memory. And when it comes to massive explosions, this can be quite hefty. So what we tend to do is once we have a VDB, like so, we tend to go VDB, activate, put down another one, and we say deactivate. What this does is it now deactivates all those voxels that are empty. Now it's not working here because all those because we've set this to have a density of 1. However, let's just mess with this one for now. So I'm going to lay down a point VOP. I'm going to drag this in here. It's my bad. I need a volume VOP. And the volume VOPs work well with VDBs anyway. So hit save quickly. And I'm going to lay down a turbulent noise. I'm going to plug in the position. I'm going to plug it into my density here. And now it's just filling the volumes where I want it to. I'm going to increase the frequency just a little bit, like so. And now we have that. Okay. Now if I go over to here and I visualize this, we can see it's still like that. But if I deactivate it now, what should happen is it should now deactivate all those active pop voxels. And I'm very curious as to why it's not doing that for some reason. So let's go with active tiles for now. As you can see, there's no active tiles. Leaf nodes. It is a little unusual for this to be like this, when it should be pruning it. But as you can see, if I turn up the prune tolerance, it actually is getting rid of some of those voxels. Or the tiles, really. But let's do a clamp. Actually, let's do a fit range. Because even though this is just going from 0 to 1, I'm going to say put the source up a little bit. So now we actually are crushing some of those voxels a little bit better. And I can bring this right down. I'm going to keep this up here just like that. As you can see, it is actually crushing it a little bit. This is technically what we want. Okay, and as you can see, it actually is clearing some of these voxels away that aren't used. Okay, so where is this useful? Well, if we have, say, an explosion of some sort. So I'm not going to do it with explosion. I am just going to quickly do a sphere. So I'm going to grab a sphere like this. I'm going to set to about 0.5. So it is actually going around like the size of 1. I'm going to up the frequency here. I'm going to put down a mountain node because I can. I am also going to clip. That's it. That's what I wanted. I want to clip it. Clip this. I'm then going to go polyfill, like so. But before I do all that, what I am going to do is I'm going to quickly grab this mountain. I'm going to transform it. I'm just going to scale it a little bit. And then I want to get a vector going from those 2 points. So, or a velocity vector, I should say. So if I look at my velocity currently, it's not quite nice. I'm also going to lay down a different mountain node so that I can increase both the height. I'm going to turn it off center noise really, and I'm going to decrease the element scale a little bit. And because I've got the same points, it will work because there's 1002 points here and 1002 points here. I'm doing this before the clip because then I would have differing point values. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go import point attribute. I'm going to say it's from my second import. I want to get the attribute of P. And then I'm going to wire this up to the point number. Technically we don't need to do this, but I tend to like to do this in my own case. I'm going to show the equivalent in Vex in a second. I'm going to then say subtract. So I now want to subtract my position from this position and plug that into the velocity. Okay. And if I scale this right up, we can see that I'm scaling this up quite a lot. Let's do that with the Vex. So I'm going to lay down an attribute wrangle, plug these two in here, and I'm going to say point or vector pos for my second import. I'm going to say 0.1 for the second input on here because we start at 0, the positional value, and the current point number. So I'm getting the current point of whatever the point is I'm running over currently. I'm then going to say v at v for velocity is equal to attribute p minus pos. And now we get the exact same thing. How about if I want to add some bit more noise? Well, let's do that. So I'm also going to increase this to 50, so we get a bit more. And let's go over to here first to visualize what I'm going to do. So even though this is already getting some variations with the mountain in terms of the directional sort of thing, I'm going to say VDB, let's take a look. I'm going to say turbulent noise. I'm going to add a position here, and I'm going to multiply it because I just want to multiply I don't want to multiply the direction, and I'm going to add a constant of 1. That already. So that it's just going to multiply. It's always going to be 1, but this will change it a little bit better. And what I'm doing is I'm changing the strength of the vector. I'm not changing the direction of the vector. So how do we do that over here in Vexland? Well, so we've got an add constant of 1, terms of this. So to do a noise, what we do is we say, because this is a float noise, I'm going to say float. N. Now that was an alligator noise, so I'm going to say a noise. So that first input is going to be my position. To get the frequency, we go times channel frequency. If we wanted to do an offset, we go minus channel V offset. Then the next one should be the amount of turbulence waves that we want. So I'm going to say 5. Then there's going to be the roughness. I'm going to say 0.5. And the attenuation, which should be 1. What about any amplitude sort of thing? So this is the amplitude here. Well, to get that, we just times this by channel float amplitude. Now we want to add, so float n plus equals 1. I'm going to say 1.0, so that it's always like that. I've already declared float n up here, so I can get rid of the float. And then finally, I say v at v times equals n. Nothing's going to change, so I'm going to amplitude this up to be about 4, like we had there. And then on my frequency, I had it at 4.6. So that should be the same from here to here. There we go, it is. Now this is going to be a caveat that's going to be with this VDB from polygons that I'm going to show. I'm also going to say I want to add to this because I want it to be going upwards mainly. So I'm going to say v at v plus equals channel vector upwards force. Now I could do this in the volume wrangle, but I'm just doing this to points for now. I'm just going to set this to be up like that. It is actually facing away from where it wants to be, so I'm just going to reverse it later on. So now then, we've got a VDB. I'm going to increase this 0.01, like so. I'm going to turn it onto my density, and I want to fill the interior. So now we have a density field, but we also want, that's a float field, which is just the density of this overall here. And we have to polyfill this, because if we don't, then it won't actually be able to create a volume from this. So that's just a quick tip. You can choose single polygon, and it will actually work a lot better. It worked because this is just a very simple geometry. What happens if we want to, we can't, over here, I could make a vector attribute called V, and it would just add it to the points. So if we go to my geometry, it would add this vector velocity to our points. However, that's not how we work with volumes. With volumes, we actually have to create an actual another channel. So there are two ways we can do this. If you don't have access to this, I'm going to show you another way, which is just kind of silly. But this is how you should technically do it, is you go velocity attributes. And if you need a velocity one, you can, and you don't have a velocity, you can just use point position. I'm going to call this vel. And the vector type doesn't actually matter, but I'm going to change this to displacement. I'm going to change this to point V to show you some things why we don't always use this. And if we don't have access to this, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do another VDB, turn that off, and we still want to have a velocity field or a vector field, what we'll have to do is we'll have to make a name. And for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go name density. I'm going to say val.x. Now we need to split this, because this is a float field, we need to split this into val.x, val.y, and val.z, much like how we did how the volume works inside of Houdini natively. So now we've got .y and .z. I can now merge these three together. And because they have that abbreviation of the .x, .y, .z, I can do a vector merge. And it will actually merge this into a vector 3 and give it just the name val, which is pretty nice. That's how we do that over there. But let's go back to here. And if we want to visualize our velocity, we can do a few methods. We can do a volume slice, which will slice our volume up down the middle, giving us this grid. And then we can do volume trail, which we then say velocity, go to velocity here like so, and we can see we're actually getting some velocity. However, that's not technically what I like to do, because we have some use cases which I will try and showcase for you now. So if I set this to about 3, it's going to take a little longer to do. Mainly because it's now much faster, or much bigger than what it should be. And you can see we've got some things over here. What happens then if we haven't filled the interior is, well, we get this little ring around the edges here, and it actually comes out pretty nasty in the overall finished result. So I'm going to hit escape for that. I'm going to set this back to 0.5, and I'm going to show you another way of doing this. So I'm going to change the point position P, which is going to give us an outward position, and what we get is we get this thing like that. I also tend to go use a scatter instead, just because I like it. I'm going to set that to density, just because then I get a more 3D version of this. Now I want to bring over all those the attributes over here from this point, like so. If I go down to my polyfill as well, you can see that there is no vectors here. That's fine. I want to bring over and the attributes or the values that I have from the vector over here into this volume here, but I'm getting it from my position. So how can I do this? Well, there's something we can use called a point cloud. And a point cloud is basically if I take a scatter here like so, and I'm going to say copy the points, I'm going to copy a sphere. Like so. I'm going to quickly just pack and instance this so that it doesn't kill it. And I'm going to set this to both 0. Now, as you can see, a lot of these spheres are overlapping. If I bring it down a bit closer, we can see that they're no longer overlapping, but that's just a visualization thing for us now. This is what a point cloud does, is if I bring it up so that they are overlapping, so about to 0.1 again, then what a point cloud does is for every single point, it makes a radius or a sphere around itself, and then it counts the amount of points, other points that are in that radius. So basically, and then what we can do is we can then look up each of those points with an average, which we can average by the amount of points that we look at, that we limit it to, and we can get the attribute from those points. So let's do that with a volume wrangle. So I'm going to lay down a volume VOP, because I have promised that I will do this in the VOPs first before I do this inside Vex, even though Vex is way easier for me. So I'm going to lay down a volume trail, and here I'm going to do a bind export, and I'm going to say it's going to go to val. I'm going to set free floats vector, and we can use a free floats vector or a vector. It doesn't matter, they're both the same. This is just a byproduct of the old volume workflow. And I can actually set this to positional here as well. Or if I wanted to, I can say constant. And if I set this to free floats vector, I can now actually set this to be like so. That's not what we want. So, what I want to do is I want to get a point cloud lookup. So I'm going to say PC, and if I type in PC, we get all these point clouds. And you can get, the ones that we use the most is point cloud find, point cloud filter, and point cloud open. What we want for this one is we want the point cloud open. So this is going to create a point cloud around it, around each point. So the file we're going to be looking through is going to be for second import. The position that we are currently going from is this position here. And what it's going to do is, instead of going over every point, it's going to go over every voxel. So that's why we wire it up into the position here. Then we have this handle thing, which is an integer. And we can't exactly just bring that out into there. So what we need to do is we need to do PC filter. So we're going to filter through each one of these. So we're going to set a maximum of 10 points we can get. And we're going to filter out, we want to get not the positional one, which is what we're going to get here. We want to get the vector. As you can see now, we're actually getting what the vector used to be. And if we increase the radius just a little bit, we're going to get the entire radius of what it should be. As you can see, it's now actually getting like a little middling part here, which I find is quite nice. And this is the averaging one here. So as you can see, it's actually smoothing it out a little bit. And that's how we get the velocity from the second input, from the points. How do we do this inside of a wrangle? So I'm going to lay down the volume wrangle, wire this in, and for this I'm going to say vector v equals PC filter PC, and it's going to get the velocity of v. That's going to error out because we don't currently have anything for PC. So I'm going to then say int for integer PC equals PC open 1 for the second input, P for the current positional attribute that we're going to go over, the current position, the radius, so I'm going to make this a channel, so I'm going to say radius, and the amount of points we're going to look up. I'm going to say to 10. And now nothing's happening, so I'm then going to say v at val equals v. Nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to happen. So I'm going to then go into here and I'm going to start increasing my radius. And as you can see, that was actually a little bit faster than it was in the volume VOP, which is why I prefer to use it in the volume wrangle. However, shock upon shock, if we dive inside a volume wrangle, we are actually using a volume VOP, which actually uses something called a snippet. Okay. And this file I shall be giving out as well later on, alongside this. Okay, so now we have that. We have two, we have a density, and we have a vector. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay down a dot network. Think about that for a second. I'm just going to wire the first input into here. And I'm going to go to pyro, or better yet, I'm just going to go smoke solver. Smoke object, wrong one, and I'm going to lay down a volume source. I'm going to set this to be the first input here. I'm going to set this to be about 2 by 2 by 2. I can actually close the boundaries here, and I want to close the y negative one, I believe it is. And I'm going to set this to be about 0. I'm going to set this to be 1. Or, if I want to be more procedural, I'll copy that and then times that by 0.5. I tend to, instead of dividing by 2, I do times because BIMDAS, it's just quicker. I'm then going to lay down a resize dynamic here. I'm going to then go tracking field, stop, and even though it's not moving, I'm going to go bound. And I'm going to wire that into my second input. Then here I'm going to set up input path. Actually, I need to put a tilde sign in front of this, otherwise it's not going to work because it's a string. I'm going to say dot and 1. I believe it should be. If I middle click now on this, it'll now go into my bound, or my second input here. Okay. I then want to bring in the density. I also want to bring in the velocity. And let's fire this up. I'm also going to say I want to go max bounds, clamp to maximum, and then guard this. As you can see, it's now pushing it right down because I have to invert my velocity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say negative. and now it's pushing it up. It's not quite pushing it out as much as I wanted to, so we could fix this by going into here, and I'm going to lerp it between these two. So I'm going to say v at v. I'm going to say at, let's see, so I want to say vector p is going to be at p minus 0, 0, 0 from the center, like so. And if I then actually set that to p now, sorry, this should be minus, we can see it's actually pushing it out. I'm pretty sure if I just set it to p, it should also work, because it is actually going from the center of the point. So I'm actually going to say lerp between that p and v by about 0.7, so that it has a little bit more outwards appearance. I believe I also need to have this at a negative, so it is actually pushing outwards. Nope. That's right, because this also needs to be in the negative as well, so I'm going to say v equals negative v. And there we go. If we set this to about 0.1, then what do we get? I have a feeling it's pushing in on itself, so let's turn that off, so it might be pushing outwards now. That's a little bit better, so it is actually pushing out. So I'm then going to lower this down to 0.06, and we're seeing some volumes or some smoke. I'm going to set the scale to be about 3. I'm going to set it to be about 0.5. Or alternatively, instead of doing this, I can say v at val equals p plus v. So they're just going to add it to each other, like so. So I'm going to set this back down to 1, so it's not as aggressive. Mind you, I do actually want the p here to be harder, so I'm going to surround this by a colon, some brackets I suppose, and times that by 3. And if I wanted it to push out some more instead of just going upwards, what I can do is I can then go into here, and I want to just get the outwards direction, not the actual y direction of this. So what I can do is I can say set at p.x 0 at p.z. Now if I just hide that, we can see it's actually just pushing out that way. Like so. Now let's say that I actually wanted to give it some bit of noise, because that is actually pushing out quite violently still. And it could be better than what it currently is. So if I just turn off this as well, so it's not pushing out so much, you can see that it is actually pushing out a lot nicer that way. Which is also, yeah, okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say enforce these bounds. I'm going to say I want these ones, and that's it. So now it is actually just going to be pushing across the ground, and we don't need to make a ground node for that. Okay. Oops. I'm going to go back up. I'm then going to add my velocity to that. And we're getting something a little bit nicer. Or in my mind at least. It's not quite what I'd like, so I'm going to actually increase this to be about 2. Make it quite large. Then we get something like this. And I'm not getting a much upwards push anymore. So I'm then going to say, negate this at least. So see if that does anything. Nope. So I'm going to try and subtract that then, even though that shouldn't exactly work. And I'm just going to aperture this by a little bit. Put this to about 2. And this is just me tweaking it now. I just want to make it look nice. I'm not too sure why it's just pushing it down quite a lot. I'd say it's because this is like so. And it's quite ugly, but currently this is what we're getting. And I actually want this little bit of break up here. So I'm also going to change my dot mask to density. It's just going to change the way this looks a little bit. It's going to give us more mushroom looks, but it's also going to help us if you take the VDB class. So I'm actually just going to say at p.y times 0.2 or 0.3. So we're actually getting some upwards as well, like so. Okay, so now we're seeing how that's working. Well, what happens if you've made if you bring in volumes? So I'm going to say VDB convert VDB, sorry. I'm going to change this to volumes, and you can see VL X, Y, and Z. If I go into here, nothing's happening. Why is that? Well, the simple reason is that this volume source here can't actually read in a three different float fields as a vector field. It needs a vector field. To help us get around this, what we can do is we can op unhide. We can go dot source volume. Source volume. Load this into here. And we're going to make the same changes. So I'm going to say density is for this. These are the same. The velocity is going to be add. I'm going to turn off this normalize. And the density is also an add as well. And then I'm going to say op input half, like I did the same in the resize. I'm going to say dot dot, and then 0 this time. And I'm going to encapsulate that in tildes. And now we're getting the I don't remember exactly how, but it shouldn't be just saying the convert VDB. It should actually be being like an extra path. Let's try that now. It's not quite working. For some reason, this op input path. Sorry, I had the wrong name. So now we're getting the volume, the VDB, and the volume's working. And I found this can be faster in some cases and give different results, which is kind of weird, and it shouldn't do that, but it does. But I'm going to keep it like this because the other way was working fine. This is just an example. Now we're going to bring in the dot import fields and go to load up my .NET node, which is going to be a smoke object. And then I'm just going to choose fire, smoke really. Bring in 3 different fields. So I don't need the CD, I don't need the temperature, and I don't need the rest, because I just want the velocity and the density. So these are coming in as volumes, and which means that the voxels are completely all active and they're using up memory quite nastily, even though it doesn't look it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a convert VDB. So I'm going to convert these to a VDB. If I go VDB tree, what we should see is that all these volumes are now active. As you can see, they all are. Not exactly what we want, so I'm going to say VDB deactivate or activate. And what's going to happen is basically nothing. Why is that? Well, that's because the velocity field is taking up all that. So let's blast out the velocity. So I'm actually going to use a split here because I'm going to change this the way we do this, and I'm going to show a trick. So I'm going to split out the density. So now this is the density on the input thing here, If we go VDB visualize, now we're actually getting it properly deactivated. And over this side, we now have the VDB, the split up vector field. So I'm going to say VDB merge, vector merge, and we're going to get something like the component grids have different transformations. That's fine, we don't have to worry about that. But now we have a velocity field here. But if we take a look at the VDB visualize tree, we're still going to get that. If we do a deactivate, we're still going to get that. What we need to do is we can say a volume wrangle, and we want to get the second one in here, and I want to multiply the velocity by the density. So how can we get the density from here? We can't just say at density. And to get an attribute from the second input, we used to say point or prim, detail, or vertex, I believe, and so on. What we can do is we can do something called a volume sample. So I'm going to quickly visualize this in the volume VOP so that I'm not leaving anyone behind. Bring the second input here, and I'm going to keep this visualize tree open so that we can see what's going to happen. I'm then going to go volume VOP. I'm going to say volume sample, and if we type in volume sample, we can see we get a volume sample and a volume sample vector. The vector will just bring in a vector field, the sample will just bring in the float field, and because density is a float field, that's what we want. I'm going to put my sample position into my position here. My second input is going to be my first, my input is going to be my second input, I'm sorry. And then I'm going to say primitive name is going to be my density. I could say primitive number, but that relies on what positional data the primitive actually is and can change. So it's better to just do this. And then I'm going to say bind export. This is going out to my velocity field. I'm going to set it to free floats vector. If I plug this in now, nothing's really going to change because this is still a volume. So I'm going to bring the bind. This is going to be a free floats vector. Please remember to change it before you do it, otherwise it's going to bring in a float vector. So I'm going to say val, it's going to disappear because it's got two binds now. I'm going to wire these two up. I'm then going to multiply this by this. And now, what should technically happen is if we go deactivate, is it should ideally be working, but it does not seem to be working. So let's prune this a little bit, and as you can see, if we prune it quite a lot, we're getting rid of a lot of the velocity that we don't need. Cool. So we've also got region to activate that we can use, I believe, but I don't think that's going to actually work unless we use like a reference. So this also needs to be deactivated. Don't know why it was on activate. So how do we do this in Vex? So volume wrangle. Let's bring this in. First input, second input. I'm going to put the prune tolerance back down to 0. Because even though it should be working, it's not. I would love to know why. Let's just bring this displacement. What's wrong? Yep, they still have that. And what we can then do, because it is it's not quite really working in the volume wrangle, the volume VOP, what we can actually do is we can make a threshold thing. So I'm going to bring in the float the density. So I'm going to say volume sample, spell it right, 1, it's going to be the density, and I'm going to be using my positional voxel for that now. What we can then do is I can say then, if den is greater than channel float threshold, and this is a better way of doing it than in the volume VOP of multiplying it. We can actually multiply it by just saying v at val multiplied by den, and that works a lot better than it did over in here. I'm still quite curious as to why it wasn't working over here. It is weird why it's not working. Wait, hang on a second. This is coming in as a float when it should be a free vector float. So I'm going to say val2. It is a vector. There we go. That's why it's important to have the vector, whatever it is there. Okay. So we can just do that in there. Works fine. We can also say, instead of multiplying it, we can say if the density is greater than this, then we can say v at val equals 0. So enable this, and what's going to happen is it's going to do the inverse of that. So I want to invert that, and now we have like an actual threshold that we can use to dig away at the density attribute. So I'm going to put it to about 0.3. That'll work quite fine. Okay. And I'm going to move this over to here. So now we have two VDB activates here. I'm then going to merge these two. And let's get rid of some attributes. So I'm going to say attribute delete. So there's only two attributes that we really need, which is the positional and the name. So I'm going to keep position. We don't have any vertex ones. We have some details, and because I'm not going to be using any of these, I'm just going to delete them. And we've still got density and smoke. Now we can get rid of the dot object name, but we need to keep the name object. So if I turn off the name, there's going to be 0 and 1. We don't know what these are. So I'm going to keep the name attribute, and then we just need to get rid of the group. Delete. So I'm just going to get rid of all of them, so I don't need any. And now we have two very small files, and let's just do a file cache to check them. So I'm going to say, I'm going to save the current frame of 38. I'm going to say sim, let's say volume test. So v1, technically I should be the v1 here. That. Oops. Oh, let's do it again. And you can save it as a BGO or a .sim or a .vdb, I should say. So test version 0. I'm going to call it version 0. I'm going to copy that. And I'm not going to worry about the frame. Hit save the disk. And let's quickly go over to here. And let's go down to simulation. And we can see that it is tiny. It's about 16 megabytes. Let's duplicate this up here. I'm going to go to this one. And I'm going to put it into the same folder. And we can see that we've pretty much destroyed the file size. We can make it go a bit further. So this is currently in a accuracy of 32 bits, I believe. So what we can then do is we can lay down a primitive node in our VDB activate here. Go to volumes, go to VDB, and we can say write 16-bit floats. I'm going to put it to the version 2. I'm going to save this one to disk. And now we get just a slightly bit smaller volume. Okay, so some extra tidbits that we can use. So let's say that we have an explosion of particles. So I'm going to make a circle. Go on the ZY plane. I'm then going to say make it primitive. I'm going to scatter. So. And what I want to do is I want to create like a little curved incline, really. So I'm going to say at p.y equals at p.x, I should say, which is going to give us this. So what I'm then going to do is I'm going to say ramp, draw a ramp. I'm then going to fit this between 0 I mean, 1, negative 1 and 1, 0 and 1. We're getting something like that. But I do technically want to have it more outwards, if that makes sense. So, there's ways of doing it, but I believe you probably do like a sine. So sine at p dot x, something like this, and at p dot y equals sine p dot z. So, or you just add it together, let's say. So we get something looking a little bit like that, except we want to fit range it. So times my channel point x and times that. Oh, this sounds about the same one. Getting something very groovy here. That's not what I wanted at all, but whatever. Different way of doing it is just transforming it like so. And I can just transform it up and outwards. Then I can do attribute wrangle, and doing the same method as we did over here. I'm going to grab this, and I'm actually going to say pos minus p because I want to keep it like this. And I actually want to say, hey, closer you are to the middle, the distance or the middle, so I'm going to say, I'm going to amplitude it by the middle, how far close you are to the middle. So I'm going to say b at b times equals the distance between at p and 0.0.0, and I want to invert that, so -1. I think it was -1, but or I could actually just go chain ramp like so, and then I can just invert that, so it looks a bit like this. Like so. And I'm also going to make sure that this actually has a bit of, so I'm going to say times by 2, that, times by amplitude, really, so we get a bit more something. And I'm going to make sure that that's not exactly at 0, but that it is more stronger in the middle. Then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to relax those iterations, that, and I'm going to put this into a pop network, so I am lazy. I'm going to use all points. Good. I'm going to say birth. So I'm going to say if $SF for sim frame is greater than 10, I believe I want it the other way around, sorry, it's less than 10. So then we get something like that. I'm going to say gravity. Brilliant. Barely any use. I'm going to put down a ground plane, merge those two together, and this is just a quick example that I'm going to put together. I'm going to turn off the proxy because I don't like having the proxy there, and I'm going to turn down the bounce quite a bit on both sides. Okay, now then I'm going to increase the speed of this so we get something like that. It is very uniform, so let's add some additional variance like so. That is still quite varied. non-varied, I should say. So now what I want to do is I want to adjust the strength of this. So I'm going to say and do another noise. So I'm just going to copy all this, set for that one, like so. The amplitude is the wrong one, so I'm going to say amplitude 2. Let's set it to be about 20 so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to adjust this. So I'm going to say this to about 2. Okay. I'm going to say use this inherited. I'm going to keep it about 10. And I'm going to say forward, actually I'm going to say negative, so that it stays there. And now we're getting a much more explosion-y feel. Doesn't even get to the end. So let's adjust this. Apply, close. Cool. And now all these should have their own little ID because it has an add ID attributes here. And I'm going to put down a trail. And I'm going to say preserve the trail to be about 50 because I'm an idiot like that. Let's say about let's say 30 instead. Let's do an add. So polygons by group by attribute of ID. And now they've all got their own little ID, which is quite nice. Take a look at it. They're nice and resampled, but I'm going to resample them further because I like my points. I'm going to put this down to a 0.5 sort of thing, so that it's not too heavy. Okay, now how about if I want to make it a bit more look a little different? So I'm going to keep it. I'm going to keep this frame here. And the way that you were taught is you did like a UV texture, and you went either arc length spline or rows and columns. Here's a better way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a for each connected piece. The connected piece is going to really help us because it's going to mean that we can just do it all in one go. And this is a for each, and this is going to go over every single point or every single piece that's connected to each other. I'm going to say max iterations. So that is a little unusual why it's doing that actually. Because we're actually bringing in that. So I'm going to say dot import fields instead. I'm going to bring in the popnet. I'm going to pop object. I'm going to say this one, and instead of this, I can just bring in the geometry of the particles. It's just going to bring in the geometry, like so. It doesn't do anything else. So now then we're just getting those points. So what I can then do is instead of doing a UV thing, because what we're doing is we're creating a ramp from, let's just go single pass for now, from point 0 to here. So if I go UV texture, lay down this, let's put the point, arc length spline, and do a color ramp on the UV. So I'm going to call this ramp actually. I'm going to say ramp from attribute onto ramp. And as you can see, it's actually going from a negative to a positive. If we go into here, and it's all got these attributes here, which I don't exactly need, but oh well. And if we look for ramp, I'm blind. There we go. There's ramp. It's actually a vector for some reason, even though it should technically just be. It's only going on the x. So we go from 1 through to 0. Here's a better way of doing that. Let's go attribute wrangle, or you can do this in the point block. So I'll do the point block first. So I'm going to say point block. I'm going to make a bind export for ramp. Okay. I can put in position and we're going to get that, but we don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm going to convert integer to float. And the reason I'm going to be doing this is because the point number is coming in as an integer. the number of points is going to come in as integer. I'm going to be dividing these, and it's going to be turning into a float. If we just do a division from between integers, it's just going to give us an integer result. So I need to do an integer to float for both of these. So I'm going to say number of points. I'm then going to go negate. I'm actually going to say subtract constant, because what we want to do is the number of floats is giving us the total number of floats, but it's not taking into account the 0th number. It's just counting 0 as 1, but we actually wanted to count, we want to just rewind it just by 1. So we're going to say subtract 1. I'm then going to divide these two. So I'm going to divide my point number between my number of points. I'm going to plug that into my ramp. If we go to our astrometry spreadsheet, we now get from 0 to 1. To do that in an attribute wrangle, it's very similar. So I'm going to say f at ramp for float ramp is going to be float. We're going to be doing something called cast. I'm going to do another float. I'm going to say at num points minus 1 at point number for the current point number. And now we get the exact same result. Okay, so that's how we get the ramp attribute. Now the method that I showed, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name, Robert, is we lay down the VDB, like I showed over here. And instead of doing it just by here, I was actually making him do it throughout this entire thing. I'll lay down a VDB. I'm actually going to say, I'm going to put down like a bound in this as well. And I'm going to say orient these boxes. I'm going to say 0.2 by 0.2 by 0.2 by 0.2 by 0.2, just so that they've got some more stuff to them, really. Technically, they should be a little bit bigger, so I'm going to say 0.5 by 0.5. Like so. Basically, we want them square, but they're not going to be square. So, there is ways of combating this, but that's alright. We don't need this now. So we then make a VDB and call it density. And we do a VDB activate using these as a reference. And you can see it's starting to slow down a little bit. And this is, oh, look at that, it's actually just filled my memory completely. It's a good thing I saved, so I'll be right back. Okay. So even though I didn't really take a break, I just rebooted it. So that was why it was crashing for him. And as you can see, it's because this is going at about 100 like that. So I'm actually going to go dive back into here. I'm going to set this back down to 1. So that it only just does it a little bit. It is very fast. But I don't really mind. And I'm actually probably just going to say by 1, just so that just a quick burst. By 2, I should say. Sort of thing. So then we get this, and I'm going to change this from that to about 10 frames, so we get something like this. Add it, and resample it this time, and I'm actually going to keep this to 0.1. And now we get this. And that was the reason why it was crashing, because it was just filling up the memory completely. So I'm going to put down another VDB. I'm going to say VDB activate. I don't think we even need to have the volume in here now. Those other ones in here. So I'm going to say by reference. As you can see, it's now filling it. I'm going to turn off the value that's giving it. But it has now activated those volumes. So I'm going to call this density. And we have the voxel size here. So I'm going to put it back to 0.5, 0.4. Now, how do we get whatever this is into here? Well, we have one way, and this is a little caveat that we're going to see as well, in the sense of this thing here, which I absolutely hate. We're actually going to get like a little blob here because of the way this is set up, because of this. So what we need to do then is I'm going to lay down the volume wrangle. Give us a moment. Okay, so I'm going to lay down a volume wrangle, plug this in here, and what I want to do is I want to create a shell of these points. So I'm actually going to resample this a bit finer, about 0.3. And this is a method that the old Houdini workflow used. And I'm actually going to do it in VOPs because it is actually a bit more advanced. So let's say volume VOP, sorry. For now, it is easier for me to do it in a wrangle, but we'll get to that in a second. So we're going to do another point cloud. We're going to do a point cloud open. It's going to be the second input. It's going to be the current position. And I don't really care about this, but I'm actually going to promote the radius up. I'm then going to say PC filter. I just want to get the position. And finally, what I want to do is I want to get the distance. So let's say distance between this position and this position. I'm going to plug that into there. And we're going to get something like this. And if we take a look, we're actually getting something over here where it's being eaten away. This is what we want. Okay then. Now, what we want to do between this is we want to fit range this properly. So I'm going to say fit range. I'm going to say my value. And I'm going to say -1 to 0 like that. And now we have this. As you can see, this is where the blob comes into it, which is something I don't like, and I'm not quite sure how to get around, because it's getting it from the first input here. I believe it doesn't work. It's better with another method, but we'll get into that in a second. So I'm going to do fit range here. I'm then going to make a parameter. This one I'm going to call my edge location. Edge location. I'm then going to say, what's the other parameter I have? I have the edge thickness, so I'm going to duplicate this. Say thickness. Thickness. And then finally we have one more called the feather. Like so. They're all floats. And now what I want to do is I want to multiply these two together. And I want to plug this result into the minimum. And then I want to add this multiply to my feather and plug that into my source maximum. It's going to go like this. Let's just adjust some values here. So we tend to have about 0.2, or typically we should have it the same one as the search radius. The edge thickness is going to be about I'm going to put this about 0.2 as well. And let's put the feather up to about 0.1 sort of thing. So we really need to adjust the feather quite a bit. We can change the edge location, but as you can see it's not really changing it because this needs to change as well. And it has changed a little bit over here, but we still want to get rid of that. Lastly, you do a VDB activate again, do a deactivate, and then do a VDB tree visualize to see what is actually activated, and that's perfectly activated there, and we've saved up on space. However, this doesn't work as well, as you could tell by the fact that it just crashed last time we did it. So a better way of doing this is to do another for each. And this one is going to go to here, and this one actually wants to go to the for each begin 1, 2, and 2, like so. This one wants to have this one here. Okay. And we're still going to go over the same names, but I'm just going to turn off this max attributes here. I'm going to put down a box. We can use a box or a primitive. and I can say orient, but it doesn't tend, but we don't have, we can't exactly adjust the thinness of it and stuff. So I believe what we can do is we can do it bound. We can do a sphere instead, or a rectangle, but I tend to do a box. I'm going to say orient it, and I'm going to set the lower padding and the minimum size. I like to set the minimum size a little bit normally, so that it always has something there. Okay, and it does technically need to be bigger than what you're going to be doing in the search radius here, or the edge location. So I'm going to put the set to 0.1 again. Okay, and then what I tend to do is I do VDB for polygons. I turn that into a VDB density. I fill that interior. If I go to visualize tree here, we're still saving on space, even though we're getting a very straight sort of look. I can now move this over to here. I need to move it to this one, and now we're getting attributes from there. However, keep in mind that you may need to add some low padding as well, just to make it properly fit. So if you take a look at that, like so, sometimes it basically does work. So there's the edge location, so I'm just going to push this up about 0.2. And if we want to get the attributes from over here, and this way we don't get that horrible middle one there, and we're still getting proper VDB here. So that's a point cloud. As you remember how I did it last time, what the point cloud does, it makes a radius around each point on the incoming geometry that we want it to be, and go like so. Now, let's say that we have the ramp. If we want to get the ramp, what I can do here is I can do PC filter. I can say ramp. I can then multiply this by the ramp, which is what I believe is going to change it a little bit, and it needs to be a flat value. As you can see now, the starting point is off. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to push this through a channel ramp. Like so. I'm going to set it to a spline float. It's going to kill everything. And now we get this. If we wanted to, we could also have the search radius or the edge location go down by the ramp as well. But for now, this is good. Actually, let's try that quickly. Yes, there we go. We get something like that. Okay. So I'm going to turn off the max iterations thing here. Just let it cook quickly. And we now have our source. We don't have any velocity coming in, so let's just quickly add velocity. Because I do want to keep the velocity if I want it. So if we remember, I'm going to say surface attributes, point P. I'm going to say val. And I'm going to set displacement, like so. And then I just want to copy the velocity over from here. So I'm going to say PC filter to the bind export. And this is going to be a vector float. It's going to be V. Chuck this out to val. I don't need to change the type. It's going to change automatically. And there we go. And the visualization is a little wonky. That's fine. So I'm going to say visibility, and I can just hide the velocity, like so. Okay, I'm going to quickly, and if I tell them over to be visualized tree, we're still getting a proper tree. So I am then going to quickly cache this out. It's to point 1. F4. So I'm going to then save the frame range. I don't care for how long. I'm going to save the disk. Probably should have aged those points, because then we're just going to get points in the ground, as you can see here. It's not something we want. And I think I just cashed out the points. Did I just cashed out the points. Oh dear. Okay. So what I'm then going to do is I'm just going to quickly go to here, and I'm just going to say, hey, how about we delete these points if the vector is too old. So I'm going to say if, so floats L is going to be length, not len, B at B. Len is for a different type of, so like that's for an array. If L is greater than floats threshold, then remove point 0 at point num. And there is really no, I like doing it in here because there's no real way of doing an if statement. That needs to be created. So then we get something like that. So I don't even need to do that many, that big of a, so I just need to do about 50 really. So I'm just going to go to here, go back up to here, go to my simulation, I'm going to delete that. Okay. Now this time, I'm actually going to properly just do that. So you can save the disk, my bad, I am very sorry about that. It was an oversight on my part. And then I'm just going to plug it into the other one we have over there. A little weirded out why that's just showing me 60, because it shouldn't just be showing me 60. Let's take a look. 202, no, okay. Redo, my bad. So what did it actually even get up to? 27. And you can see how fast it actually is without doing the stupid VDB tree visualize. Now it's getting smaller because the amount of points are going down. And there we go. Okay, now let's plug that into here. Dive inside. And technically the volume is going the wrong way, so the velocity is going the wrong way. So let's change that. So I'm also going to say, let's go to 0.1. So I'm going to scale the velocity the other direction. So it's pushing it outwards, or inwards really. But it does have a weird effect because it builds this whole mushroom cloud around it, which is normally not what we want. But it does give a better look in the sense of more of an explosion, I'd say. And we can adjust this here a little bit, but that is going into a whole nother realm of differing things. So let's just set this back to 1. And let's just simulate that out again. And it looks like it actually is calculating everything from scratch. So I believe I didn't change this. So this needs to be loading from disk. I'm going to say port error, just say no geometry. So now this should be a lot faster. Yes, there we go. That's my bad again. Now we get something like this where it's just pushing outwards. It's not very realistic, and I do actually prefer the other way. But I suppose we could actually just mix and match those two. This one being -2. And we're actually going to source some temperature into here. Which maybe let's just say 0.5 instead. And let's just visualize this. Let's go to the density, type in density here, then type in temperature. Scale that up a little bit. Let's go to the emit range. Like that. Now we're getting a bit of both worlds really here. Not really for this one, so let's just go back to 1.2, I should say. And I am then going to just put some tools in here because I want some. Then I'm going to say control field is density, like that, remap control field. And I'm just going to say 0.2 really, which is really going to mess it up. But what we really wanted to do is mess up the temperature, I should say. So let's go to temperature. And it's not quite messing it up as much as I'd like it to, but it is still nice. And then it's just doing this fuzzy thing which I don't like. Let's say that to temperature. Let's bring this down here and let's make these baselines. Like so. Oops, keep the time scale the same. And I'm just going to keep it like that. And we're getting some nice looking things here now, like so. And this is quite low res still. If I wanted to add some more, I could add some more. So I'll go merge. Set this. Let's bring down the swirl size to be 2, and let's bring this down to 1.5. So, and I'm going to do almost half this. It's going to be much slower now. But we're still getting this horrible starting mushroom. But this, if you actually go into the volume or the explosion effects sort of thing, you can see how to fix this. And now we're getting a bit of suction inwards as we should. And again, I'm actually going to give this file to everybody so you can all see what I've done and how it works. And so on. And there's no gravity affecting this either, but that is just my artistic choice. I could have some gravity, but I don't want some. Then we take a look at this. You can see that if I do this here now, and if I say, I'm going to say 0, like so. I'm going to call this fluid. And I'm going to say save frame range from here to about 100. I'm going to say load from disk, and I'm going to say save. Now, all this is actually going to take a little while to do. So it has to, resample it, has to deactivate edges, has to convert it all. And this can actually take a little while to do. So bear in mind for that. Ideally, someone would would dive into the C++ behind all this and actually make a node that does all this behind the scenes for you. But for now, this is what we have. This is the method we use. Maybe one day I'll be able to make the node that actually just does all this for us. But that is the introduction, or the basic deep dive into volumes, VDBs, how they all work, so on and so forth. Let's just go into here. Here's our volume test fluid. It is not actually saving it out. Ugh, I hate it when this happens. I just forget stuff. There we go. And we can see that the file size is actually still pretty small. And I'll do a comparison against these two. And this is at 0.06, I believe, which is pretty good resolution considering the scale size of the explosion that I've got going. I don't even know if I'm using all my CPU. I'm not really using all my CPU, which is nice. Wish I could use more. Some of these solving or equations are multi-threaded. Some of these aren't, which is why at some points it's very slow. Which is why I think a lot of the fluid ones are slow, is because I need everything to be done before it can move on to the next segment, because it can't be multi-threaded to a great extent. Not to mention it has to deal with the fact that it's dealing with points and volumes as well. Okay, there we go. Now we have that. I didn't actually bring in the temperature or write out the temperature, but that's alright. I'll write it out here in this one. And this one's going to be version 1. So I'm going to say doc import, and I'm going to say invisible, and it's going to be my temperature. And then we have the temperature. And then I'm going to write this out quickly. Save that to disk. Alright, I need to save the frame range from, what was it, to 100? Yep, to 100. Save that out. And you can see it's a lot faster in the sense that it's just saving it out very quickly. And you can just do that. You can just save it out very quickly and then go on and do it later. And as you can see, the file size is getting massive. But keep in mind that we do actually have an extra field now. I forgot to bring in the extra field here, but it wouldn't make much of a difference. Just waiting for it to hit that 75th frame that it was on originally. There we go. Now we have temperature, density, and that. So if I go down to the split here, we're splitting out the density. I also want to split out the temperature, so that we're getting temperature and that. We're activating these two. If I just take a look at VDB tree, just to make sure what we're doing. So if I go density, yep. Go temperature, yep. It's working the same. And now if I go down to here, we've got them all. Let's just go visualize tree here. And we can see that we're actually getting a proper visualization of the tree. I'm going to say this out one more time, because now we're actually having the temperature. And if we take a look at this, the file size here is 7.4 gig, 7.5, let's round it up. And where is this currently at? Around here. As you can see, it is actually just adding like a few megabytes to these frames, but not to any great degree. As you can see, this is already on like frame 57 sort of thing, and it's still trying to write out the frames, and this can be a major roadblock. I am actually writing out to an SSD. So I've got three SSDs, 2 of them are M2s, and I'm currently writing out to one of my M2s on my C drive. Just let that finish. And then you can skip most of this because this is just this is very technical now. We're done. So that last one was 7.5 gig, and this is 1.5. So that's a pretty good increase in quality. Just go to our VDB volume visualization node here, chuck in density and density. So now we're getting that. And what we tend to like to do is we like to have light. So I'm going to go down to my lights here. Have this on the first one. I'm going to say distant light. And I tend to have like 2 backing lights. So I have one fill light and one backlight, sort of thing. Okay, so this one's going to be my sun. I'm going to pull it out to be my sun, sort of thing. And this one's just going to be a bit more of like a hazy blue, very small. And I'm going to put this down to 0.5, sort of thing. So it's only just touching it. Go to here, and let's bring in our temperature. And let's bring in our temperature. And I'm going to go from that to black body. I'm going to push this right up, and I can change the emissions field. And we tend to like to copy this parameter here, and then just, as you can see, I can now bring that back in, even though it was already perfectly there. Just down to about 2, and there we go. We have a proper explosion. So I'm going to keep this here. Do 5. Bring it down, actually. Bring it out to like 1. And then I'm going to mess with this. So I'm just going to make this a bit more orange than what it already is. I'm going to make this also a bit more orange than what it is. And I'm going to push this right up to here. But yeah, I'm going to push this one right up to here, like that. And I'm not too good with making these colors good, but there you go. Now I'm going to render this out, and you're going to be able to see that as the showcase for this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. If there's any more questions, like if I went over something too fast. If something didn't make sense, just ask, and I will try my best to explain it again. This went on way longer than I thought it would. 2 hours almost, flipping heck. Okay, well, thank you, and I shall see you in Discord.